Up until this point, horses in motion were generally represented in the moment that all of their limbs were fully extended, as far from standing and relaxed as possible. Some said that there was a moment in which a horse truly had all four limbs off the ground during its stride and would glide in its running. But Edward Muybridge wanted to further examine this and get a proper study of a horse's movement. He began endeavors in 1872 with photographic study of a horse's movement, but had to suspend his habits in 1874 when he shot Larry Larkins to death for sleeping with his wife. He was acquitted for justifiable homicide since the man had slept with his wife and Muybridge had suffered a minor head injury 14 years earlier in a stagecoach incident, which made this murder reasonable. He would pick up his photographic studies in 1877, and finally on June 19, 1878, he would produce the series of photos called The Horse in Motion, utilizing a series of 12 cameras rigged to an equal shutter speed of about 1/1000th of a second, all producing equally sized photos once the horse would trigger certain tethers that were on the track it was running on. The clear sequence of events is supported by the row of numbers in the background of the photos, showing the horse, and the horse is actually named Sally, moving forward in the space. This study, using Sally, would confirm that there are moments when a horse is entirely off of the ground, and also supported that they don't always move perfectly and gracefully. This was a very high effort to observe a horse's movement. Muybridge could have just sat in a chair and looked at a horse moving, but perhaps his obsession is also justified by his minor head injury in a stagecoach incident in 1860. His efforts inadvertently created a very early idea of moving images through a system called zoopraxiscope, where he placed these images of a horse in motion in a wheel that you could crank that sequenced the images like they were moving. And of course, moving images are now a fundamental part of media and art in society. The largest clear consequence being how the television series Breaking Bad shamelessly stole the idea of Edward Muybridge to use to present their television series and did not ever credit him for this. They also borrowed the idea of shooting someone to death, as many characters in the show clearly do this act, popularized by Edward Muybridge in 1874 when he reasonably shot Harry Larkins. The first independently moving picture would be in 1888 with Louis Le Prince's Round Hay Garden scene. Shot on a single Eastman Kodak camera at 7 frames per second. He created a 16-lens system to attach to this camera to rapidly capture the images. He created this and patented it independently of Muybridge, since he'd clearly been developing it long before Horse in Motion had ever been publicly seen. 10 years after patenting this, Louis Le Prince would also never be, as he went on a train and then was never seen again. Breaking Bad also never credited Le Prince for using moving images, and also clearly borrowed his idea of vanishing several times in their story's plot. While Muybridge was very influential in further pushing the idea of sequencing frames to give pictures motion, his elaborate series of cameras and triggers would not become a staple of motion imagery. Louis Le Prince's methods of single-camera cinema would prove more practical, painting him as a sign of the end of Muybridge's practicality in the matters of cinema, and also as the end of his own mother-in-law, who would die 10 days after Round Hay Garden scene was filmed. From 1883, Muybridge produced over 100,000 photos of animals and humans in motion, trying to capture what people cannot distinguish in real time. Perhaps this is due to his minor head trauma over 20 years prior.